Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man wala wa ba'd. We'll continue with our Eyes On program, where we talk about what's happening in different parts of the Muslim world. And today we're going to be focusing on Sudan, inshallah, and with the current conflict carrying on in Sudan. Sudan is officially called the Republic of Sudan and is a country in Northeast Africa. It borders the Central African Republic to the southwest, Chad to the west, Libya to the northwest, Egypt to the north, the Red Sea to the east, Eritrea and Ethiopia to the southeast, and South Sudan in the south. And the population of Sudan is approximately 52 million, and 97% of the population is Muslim. Islam came to Sudan after Muslims conquered Egypt under the Khilafah of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhum, under the army of Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu. We're going to give a little bit of a brief overview of the current conflict in Sudan and how it started and what is currently taking place there and who the major actors are in this conflict, and to try and better understand the situation. The current conflict in Sudan has been called the largest humanitarian crisis since records began. This means that since we have official records of different conflicts and crises happening globally, the crisis in Sudan is the largest. And the two main rivals in this conflict and in Sudan, and there are two main rivals in this conflict, and the country is basically split between them. You have the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, and the SAF, which is the Sudanese Armed Forces. The Sudanese Armed Forces control the east, north, and center of the country, and the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, control the western region of the country. The SAF are led by Abdullah Kathrada al-Burhan, and the RSF are a paramilitary group, and they're led by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, although he's more commonly known as Hemeti. Because of this conflict, there is a real fear in the country and globally that this war will split the country into two, and it may become a permanent split of the country. So you'll have two new countries of Sudan, basically. And this has already happened once in 2012 when South Sudan seceded and became its own country. To properly understand the current conflict, there are a few important things to know. Sudan has a very diverse population with different ethnicities and tribes, and possibly more than 500 ethnicities and tribes. And some of these tribes identify as Arab, meaning that they are originally descended from Arab tribes, and some identify as African, meaning that they are closer to the sub-Saharan African tribes. This creation of African versus Arab identities came in large part as a product of British colonization. As always, whenever the British enter into somewhere, they mess everything up. And this division is one of the dynamics that is playing out in this war. To understand it properly, we need to speak about Umar al-Bashir. Umar al-Bashir was an authoritarian leader who ruled Sudan for 30 years from the late 1980s. And Bashir was from a Sudanese Arab tribe in the north, near the capital of Khartoum. And while he was the leader of Sudan, he was accused of favoring Arab communities in the north and near the capital. He would give these communities top positions in the state and in the army, for example. And this created a lot of ill feelings and resentment from the non-Arab tribes, or what is referred to as the African tribes or communities. And those communities are mostly concentrated in regions near the south and away from the capital of Khartoum in the north. In 2003, some non-Arab groups in the western region of Darfur launched an armed rebellion against the government of Umar al-Bashir. And to respond to them, Bashir funded militias from the Arab communities in Darfur to fight against this rebellion. And these militias were known as the Janjaweed. There were already divisions between the Arab communities and non-Arab communities for a variety of reasons, and Bashir was accused of exploiting those divisions by funding the Janjaweed. The Janjaweed went on to carry out a genocide against the non-Arab communities in Darfur. They killed around 300,000 people and set fire to entire villages. In 2013, Bashir's government rebranded the Janjaweed as the RSF. So they became now known as the Rapid Support Forces, and were officially recognized paramilitary group under the control of Bashir, Umar al-Bashir, and Hemeti was their leader. And at this time, the RSF and the SAF were basically on the same side. The SAF is now the official government army, the Sudanese Armed Forces, and the RSF were now a secondary paramilitary group, but both of them were under the control of Umar al-Bashir. And they were both part of basically the Sudanese security system. Now in 2019, there were large protests against the government of Umar al-Bashir, and within a few months, both the RSF and the SAF turned against Bashir and removed him from power. And this was a big moment in Sudan, because they now removed a dictator who was ruling them with an iron fist for 30 years. After the Bashir fell, there was a transitional period where power is supposed to be split between a civilian government and military leadership. And the military leadership had General Abdullah al-Burhan, the leader of the SAF, at the top, and Hemeti was his number two, his second in command. Now in 2021, the military led by Burhan formed a coup and abandoned sharing power with the civilian government and took over the whole country. And this coup is what led Sudan to the state it's in now and down the road to the current war. There was a power struggle between Burhan and Hemeti, and especially over plans because Burhan wanted to merge the RSF into the Sudanese Armed Forces. He didn't want to have a second group led by somebody else. He said, no, I need to have everything under me. So he wanted to just include them into the armed forces. And obviously, Hemeti, he didn't want this because now this is a threat to his power, and he resisted the merging of the two groups. And because of this disagreement, it became so severe that by April of 2023, they both decided that the only way to sort the situation out and to keep their individual power was to eliminate the other one. We need to kill the other guy. So each leader, they don't just want to win a war, they want to eradicate the other side, and they want to have full control over the whole country and its resources. And this is how the current war began, as a power struggle between the RSF and the SAF, and more specifically between Burhan and Hemeti. The conflict started in the capital of Khartoum, and then it spread towards the rest of the country. Tens of thousands have been killed, and more than 12 million have been displaced. Both sides have targeted civilians with atrocities, and both sides have been accused of committing war crimes. Due to the severity of the war and its violence and effects, nowhere near enough aid has been able to enter into Sudan, and there have been outbreaks of famine throughout the country. The war has been so violent, and especially in the province of Darfur and in western Sudan, where the RSF has consolidated its power. This is where they have the most control, and they are the most severe in their violence and their atrocities. And the RSF now controls all of Darfur. Since just a few months ago, they basically consolidated power in Darfur and removed any opposition, and they started pushing east, with intense battles between the RSF and the SAF in the north and west Kordofan, the province neighboring Darfur. As the RSF have taken more and more territory, they have committed a horrific pattern of atrocities against being committed by their fighters, against anyone who comes in their way. They cut off food and water supplies to cities. They trapped thousands of people. They've also continued committing massacres against the non-Arab communities in places like the city of Janina. It's approximated that up unto 15,000 people were killed just in Janina. And this was in the beginning in 2023. And more recently, we've seen targeted killings and horrors in Al-Fashir, where with the RSF fighters themselves even taking videos and posting them online, bragging about their killings and bragging about what they've been doing. And what happened in Al-Fashir was just in last October. Aside from the power struggle between the two sides, there is another area of this war, which is the role of outside players who have all their own interests. And these players provide political and financial support and military support for both sides. The main backer for the SAF is Egypt, because Egypt is a neighboring country to Sudan, and they want to have a stable, or at least relatively stable neighbor that they can have friendly ties with. And also because Sudan has a lot of natural resources within them, so they want to have a neighbor that they can deal with and take advantage of these resources. And the SAF has also relied on Turkey and even Iran for weaponry. The RSF has the UAE as their biggest backer. The UAE continues to deny supporting them, but it's well known that they are the main supporter for the RSF, and they provide them with political and military power and support. And along with the UAE, the RSF relies on a network of different states in the region surrounding Sudan that have close ties with the UAE. So any other countries that have good ties with the UAE, they also support the RSF. Amnesty International has reported that an almost unimpeded supply of weapons are being supplied into Sudan by states and corporate actors around the world, continuing to fuel the conflict. They found evidence of weapons from Turkey, Russia, Serbia, China, Yemen, and the UAE. And this is in spite of the fact that there is supposed to be an international ban on any weaponry going into Sudan, and especially into Darfur, due to UN arms embargo that has been in place since 2004. And this just goes to show, like, once again, how useless and toothless the United Nations is. They can put embargoes and release statements and put a decree out, but in reality, they can't actually enforce anything. Everything goes. They can say whatever they like, but there's no power behind them. And the embargo in Sudan is one example that we can see. And obviously, we can see from Gaza also how many statements and how many embargoes and how many things have been said from the United Nations themselves, and we can see it's done nothing. As I mentioned, Sudan has a lot of natural resources, and that's another aspect to this war. One of the main resources in Sudan is gold. They have a lot of gold in the country. And both the RSF and the SAF use this gold to fund their fight, to buy weapons and supplies like food and fuel. Sudan is so rich in gold that it's a multi-billion-dollar trade and is the largest source of income for both sides. As I mentioned, Sudan is bordered by 7 other countries, and it's thought that the gold is being smuggled out of Sudan through these countries. There are a lot of smaller armed groups and traders and smugglers, and even neighboring governments as well as governments that are further away, that are using the chaos of this war to take advantage and to grab whatever gold they can and use it for themselves. Now, all of these different aspects all come together to continue the war, to further the war, and to sustain the war. Because everybody has their own independent reasons and interest for having this war continue. Basically, nobody wants this war to end. RSF and SAF, they want to completely eliminate the other side, and the neighboring countries, they can take now whatever natural resources they want. They can go in, send in smugglers, send in black arms dealers, make money from weapons, selling weapons to both sides, and take the gold out and make money for themselves. There are so many different players and billions of dollars at stake. And both the RSF and the SAF are trying to solidify their authority in the areas that they hold. And they have each actually set up their own rival governments. The SAF in Port Sudan in the north, and the RSF in Niala in the southwest. It's extremely important to remember and to know that neither the RSF or the SAF are legitimate governments. It's a war between a government that came into power from a coup and a paramilitary group that came out of mass killing, murder, and ethnic cleansing of the Sudanese people. And this leaves the Sudanese people stuck in the middle in a war where nobody has their interest at heart. They are just trying to survive each day, wishing an end to a war that they've been stuck in for the past 2 years. And this is really a war, not between two sides, but a war against civilians and regular people just trying to survive, and who just want a government that actually cares about them and has their interests in mind. We're going to move on to the next section, which is a brief description of the suffering and the persecution of the Sudanese people. The biggest tragedy of Sudan is that, unlike other countries and other areas that we've talked about in the past, like Kashmir, like Myanmar, East Turkestan, what's happening in Sudan isn't from a kafir group or a kafir government against Muslims. It is against two sides who are supposedly Muslim, against each other, fighting and committing crimes and atrocities against the Muslims in the country. So you have two sides who claim they're both Muslim, and they're killing everybody in their way. So you have soldiers and fighters killing civilians, committing crimes and atrocities, and all the while they're mentioning the name of Allah, they're shouting the takbir, as if by mentioning the name of Allah while committing their crimes, it makes it like, it legitimizes it or justifies it, and it makes it now a jihad, just because you shout Allahu Akbar. Let's talk about the civilians and what they're facing in this war. As I mentioned, when the war started in 2023, it began in the capital of Khartoum. This led to around 1.4 million people having to flee the capital and the nearby cities. And that was around 15% of the population in those areas. And those unable to leave, they were trapped. They were just stuck where they were. And they were stuck in the middle of the fighting between the RSF and the SAF, and they were killed by street fighting, they were killed by artillery fire and air attacks. When each side was shooting against each other, there's people stuck in the middle, and they were just collateral damage, crossfire. While the RSF and the SAF, neither of them can be considered as good groups or just groups, the RSF does seem to be significantly worse than the SAF. Even from the beginning, they were accused of terrorizing people. Homes were robbed, occupied and vandalized, and even destroyed. There has also been a consistent pattern of sexual violence being committed against women and girls, and even against men and boys, with fighters capturing them and raping them. Areas of Khartoum lost electricity, and there was a complete siege with no food, no water, no medication, nothing for the people. There was an incident that took place in the beginning in Khartoum where at least 71 children and babies in an orphanage died because there was no medical aid for them and no food for them. So they died from hunger and from fever. 71 just in one orphanage. While what happened in Khartoum was bad, it was even worse in Darfur. As I briefly touched on, the RSF came from the Janjaweed, which were a group of the Arab tribes that were funded and supported by Umar al-Bashir, the previous president, and they came about to destroy the rebellion against Bashir by the non-Arab tribes in Darfur in 2003. And the Janjaweed, before they became the RSF, were absolutely brutal. They killed, they raped, they burned down homes, they burned people alive, and they just committed a genocide against the people in Darfur, and they displaced up to a third of the entire population of Darfur. Since that time, since 2003, the and when the Janjaweed became the RSF, they kept a stronghold in Darfur, and they even control many of the gold mines in Darfur, and this is a strong source of revenue for them. And while the RSF and the SAF are fighting each other in other parts of Sudan, in Darfur, the Sudanese army has almost all retreated, and the RSF and the other Arab militias that they're aligned with have full control of that area, and they've picked up their old fights. So this RSF and the other militias that they are aligned with, they continue to target those that they targeted since 2003. So what they consider as the non-Arab or the African tribes and communities. In 2023, in the area of El Janina, the capital of West Darfur, there were harrowing reports of atrocities being committed there. There were videos of dead bodies lining the streets, people who had been killed by the RSF, and it is estimated by the Sudan Doctors Union that at least 1,000 people had been killed, and this was a low number. The local tribes, they estimate the number to be closer to 5,000. There's a testimony by one woman, Noor, who managed to escape the killing. She said, "The Arabs don't leave us alone. When they come, they kill and rape and burn, and we're vulnerable. If we let them, they'll burn our houses with people inside." Another survivor of El Janina described it as having been turned to swamps of blood. The streets were running with blood. Between late April and mid-2023, the RSF killed and massacred for 50 straight days. Just to be able to bury the dead, people had to come in the dead of night and collect the bodies so that at least they have some cover in the darkness from sniper fire. They were forced to bury their dead in mass graves. They didn't even have a chance to actually give everybody their own individual grave. They had to just put them in one pit. Some of the dead were burned beyond recognition, others had limbs missing, and others you could just see that there was gashes, big gashes in their throats where they were just executed, slaughtered. And it wasn't just days of killing, it was months of brutal massacre. Survivors talked about how children were shot, women and girls were raped, men and boys were executed, people were randomly killed by snipers, and others were even killed inside masajid. So they went into masajid hoping that they will have some shelter from the killing, and the RSF, they didn't care. It's a masjid, it held no sanctity to them. They went and they destroyed and they killed whoever was inside. The RSF and the Arab militias were particularly focused on the Masalit, the ethnic Arab African tribe in Al Janina, and they were particularly focused on men and boys who they saw as potential fighters, somebody who they might stand up against us. So to try and save their sons, the mothers would dress their sons as girls, they would hide them under their beds, or if they saw the RSF coming, they'll push them out of the windows and hope that they will be able to run away. The destruction was so bad that in some cases, from satellite imagery, you could see the results of what happened on the ground. Where there was a village, now there's nothing. Where you could see if they even took pictures of where the killing was so bad, where before the ground looked normal. And then after the killing started, there were large patches of dark soil where you could see this is where there were absolute massacres taking place, and it was just pools of blood. To escape what was happening in Al Janina, more than 290,000 fled to the neighboring country of Chad. And what happened in Al Janina wasn't just isolated. These ethnic targeting and massacres took place across a lot of the towns in West Darfur. The RSF and their allied militias have consistently used rape as a weapon of war against women and girls especially. There are tons of reports by survivors and witnesses describing the rape that happened. There are even videos by the RSF fighters themselves that they took, boasting about what they did, and even going to so far as to say that this rape that they committed was their right, their haqq, as if Allah Azza wa Jal gave them the right to rape. And while they're making these boasts, they're mentioning the name of Allah in them. These videos are online, anybody can see them. You just have to search it, you can go on Twitter and you can find them. One 15-year-old girl described how she and her friend were gang raped. The RSF entered where she and her family lived. They dragged her father out and shot him in the street. And while her mother went out and was begging them to stop, they shot her in the throat and killed her as well. And then they burned down the family's home. The girl and her friend, they tried to escape, but they were captured by around 5 RSF fighters. They were locked in a room, and for 5 hours, the fighters took turns raping the girl and her friend. The friend was shot and killed because she started to shout back against these criminals, and so they executed her. The girl, she said, I heard my friend screaming, and then I heard a gunshot, and that's it. And the girl, she said, I survived only because I didn't say anything. I kept quiet, and this is the only reason I survived. Even more recently is what occurred in Al-Fashir just in last October. And Al-Fashir is a city in the state of North Darfur. Al-Fashir was the last city that had some resistance against the RSF and was the last city that the SAF held. Thousands of families were forced to flee to the neighboring city of Tawila. More than 170 unaccompanied and separated children arrived in Tawila without their parents or relatives. They just wandered into the city by themselves. The RSF overran Al Janina in October after they had besieged the city for 18 months. For 18 months, there was a siege where they didn't allow food or medical supplies in or out, and they did not allow anybody to escape. They would constantly bomb the city, and anyone trying to run out, they would execute them. The people inside Al-Fashir were forced to survive on dirty water and animal food. The food that they were giving, whatever livestock they had, this is what only that they had to survive on. And to try and protect themselves from the bombings, they had to dig pits in their homes. At least they can hide in this pit, in this hole in the ground. Maybe it's going to give them some kind of shelter. In late October is when the RSF finally seized Al-Fashir. And when they came in, they didn't just take over the city. They did what they did in Al-Janina and in other cities, and they ran through it, killing everybody who they came across, whether they were a fighter or a civilian. The RSF fighters, again, took videos of themselves and what they were doing and posted them online, boasting about what they did. They posted videos of themselves lining up civilians in the road, asking them questions, and then regardless of whatever the answers that they were given, they just executed them in the street. They posted videos of them making people run down with whatever they were carrying, and then they would shoot them in the back in cold blood, all while they're shouting the takbir. The RSF fighters took videos of them entering into a hospital and killing everybody inside. I've seen these videos with my eyes. I'm not just saying like these are videos that I read about what happened. I saw them myself. The killings were so bad in Al-Fashir, again, that you could see the blood-stained ground from satellite imagery. They took images, satellite images, from before October and then after when Al-Fashir fell, and you can see where these massacres were taking place just by the dark spots in the ground. And the soldiers, or not the soldiers, these fighters, these criminals from the RSF, when they entered, they told the people, there's no such thing as a civilian here. Everybody here is a fighter. One of the worst offenders in this massacre of Al-Fashir was a man, and his nickname is Abu Lulu. And he was given the name Abu Lulu, the butcher of Al-Fashir. Abu Lulu, he was one of those who was in charge of, or he was the main commander in charge of the RSF fighters who were besieging Al-Fashir and who entered into Al-Fashir. His real name is Al-Fatah Abdullah Idris, and he is one of the RSF's most brutal commanders. One story told by a survivor of Al-Fashir was of how he killed a man, took the man's own phone, recorded the dead man, and then sent the video to the man's mother, boasting like, I killed your son, see what I did. And there's many more videos and statements from survivors showing and describing how he would execute civilians trying to flee Al-Fashir and massacring hundreds, if not thousands. He himself took a video boasting that by my own hands I killed, just by myself, not my soldiers, myself, I killed 2,000, just by myself. And he posted this video to TikTok. And he was laughing and making a joke while he was in this video. The only consequence that Abu Lulu faced for all these crimes and for his videos bragging about what he did is that he was Ahmeti, and the RSF, they arrested him. They made a show and they arrested him for a short time, maybe a few days only. And after he was released, they didn't tell him to stop what you're doing. They released him and they said, don't take videos of what you're doing. Not stop, just don't take videos of it anymore. The RSF, they didn't just kill people in Al-Fashir. They would torture them as well. They would take a big truck and drive it over somebody slowly while they're still alive. They would capture and beat civilians before they killed them. They would hunt for the young men and boys who they thought they might fight back against us and executed them where they were. In one incident, they captured 3 brothers. They got one of the brothers to call his relatives, and while he was on video call with his relatives, they shot him in the head. And then they told the relatives, if you want to see the other 2 brothers, then you're going to have to pay us a ransom. And if you don't pay us this ransom, we're going to kill these 2. And you're not even going to hear about it. You're never going to know what happened to them. Just as they did in Al-Janina and other places, these RSF fighters raped women and girls. One survivor told of how she and her 14-year-old daughter were stopped and captured by RSF fighters and beaten and raped. And the 14-year-old girl ended up dying because of how severe the rape and beating was. These examples from Al Janina and Al Fashir are just two highlighted examples of what has happened throughout Darfur and the surrounding areas by the RSF. And it has happened in countless cities and is continuing to happen up until today. But it's not only the RSF who are committing these crimes and atrocities. The SAF, the Sudanese army, they also have their own fair share of crimes and killings. They have been accused of bombing hospitals and targeting medical personnel. They have been accused of forcibly recruiting men and boys to fight for them. Boys as young as 12 years old. They will kidnap them and tell them, now you're part of this army, and they will send them into the front lines. The SAF have also bombed and shelled indiscriminately, killing anyone who happened to be in the area. And SAF fighters have also killed hundreds of civilians who happened to be caught in the crossfire between them and the RSF fighters. There were reports in January of 2025 that the SAF also used chemical weapons in rural areas at least 2 times. And the SAF has also tortured the civilians that they captured. They tortured them by electric shock. They've held them in cells that they've crowded to such an extent that you have people, they had to sleep standing. While they're standing, they have to sleep. They have also sexually abused men and boys, as well as girls as young as 12, and they've taken girls as young as 12 and forced them into marriage, and they have threatened them that if they don't get married, we're going to kill your family. The war in Sudan has created such an immense need for aid that is nowhere close to being met. It's estimated, and this is just an estimate, that more than half the population, at least 30 million, so we said 52 million is the population of Sudan, at least 30 million need some kind of aid. Aid groups working in the country say that they need $3 billion a year just to be able to provide the proper help that's needed, and they haven't even gotten half of that. Sudan is now the largest humanitarian crisis ever recorded. Because of both the SAF and the RSF, people have died and continue to die from hunger and thirst. Children and babies are dying every day from malnutrition and lack of medical care. The other enormous challenge with aid in Sudan is actually getting the aid to the people and to those that need it the most. Both the RSF and the SAF have been accused of restricting access to aid and stealing it. Warehouses and offices belonging to aid groups have been looted and their vehicles have been stolen. Now, in spite of all of this, in spite of everything that's happened, the regular Sudanese people are doing their best to come together and to do whatever they can. Groups of activists have come together to form what is known as resistance committees. And they're stepping in to do their part and doing their best to play the role of some kind of a government. And they do their best to set up and to run clinics, to connect power grids in parts of Khartoum, and to help the local population. For the regular people of Sudan, as I already mentioned, this is not their war. They're just trying to survive. And no one knows when it will end or how it's going to end. The people of Sudan have been ignored for so long, they don't even know if they're going to survive until the next day. They can't even have this thought in their mind about the end of the war. They are just thinking, what's going to happen tomorrow? Am I going to survive until tomorrow? If I do, what am I going to do tomorrow? We're going to move on to the final section, which is, what can we do? The biggest calamity and the biggest tragedy of what is happening in Sudan is it is being done by those who claim to be Muslim, from both the RSF and the SAF. And it is being supported by supposed Islamic countries. What kind of Islam is it that they claim to practice that allows them to do what they do? What kind of aqeedah do they follow that it allows the massacres, the torture, and the rapes of fellow Muslims, especially civilians and young children? What kind of Muslims rape children as young as 1 year old? The second biggest tragedy of Sudan is that they've been ignored and forgotten by Muslims worldwide. When was the last time we heard someone give a conference or a khutbah or a halaqah or some kind of seminar just dedicated to speaking about the people of Sudan? We have heard over the last 2 years, and rightfully so, the du'as for the people of Gaza. But where are the du'as for the people of Sudan? where are the protests for Sudan? Where are the efforts made to raise awareness for Sudan? What is it that we treat the people of Sudan as if they are not important? What makes it that what they are going through is on par with what is happening in Gaza? Like what I've mentioned, we've heard it coming from Gaza also. So it's not like this is something on a lower level. Exactly what is happening in Gaza, what we've seen and heard from Gaza is exactly what is happening in Sudan. So why is it that the Sudanese are not important to us? Do we think that just because Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa is in Palestine, that this now it makes the people of Palestine superior? Don't we know that if the Kaaba was destroyed, it is less important in the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jal than if the blood of one single Muslim is shed? What are we going to do when the people of Sudan make dua against us because we've ignored them? What are we going to do when we're raised on Yawm al-Qiyamah and Allah Azza wa Jal asks us what we did for the people of Sudan? Or when the people of Sudan complain to Allah Azza wa Jal about us, what kind of answer are we going to give? When it comes to what's happening in Sudan, at least when I talked about other places, I could give some steps, some things that we could do to directly help those, whether they were in Kashmir or East Turkestan or even Myanmar. When it comes to Sudan, it's much more difficult to give some kind of solution or to give at least steps about what we can do to help them. Because first of all, there's no clear side to root for. You have no good options. You have the SAF and you have the RSF, and both sides are criminals. And the biggest practical thing that we can do is to at least learn and to keep up to date with what is happening to the people of Sudan and to spread awareness, because the majority of people have no idea. So at least we can keep up to date and spread this awareness of what's happening in Sudan and use whatever tools that are at our disposal to make sure that the Sudanese are not forgotten. The next thing that we can do is to give sadaqah if we are able to and where we can to those in Sudan. And I know I mentioned that there is a lot of stealing of the aid of what's being given or trying to be spread throughout Sudan, but even with that, we still have to do our best to try, because at least whatever is able to get through, it is badly needed. And if our contribution is able to save even one person, help to save even one life, it's worth it, inshallah. Sudan is one of the poorest areas in the world right now, and as I mentioned, more than half the population, 30 million people, need some kind of aid. We can also boycott the UAE for their role in funding the RSF, just as we boycott Israel for what's happened, and Israeli companies and companies that support Israel for what they're doing in Palestine and in Gaza. If someone is planning to go visit the UAE for vacation, if we know of someone, if we are thinking of it ourselves, we should cancel this. If we know people who are planning, we should tell them, don't waste your time. How can you support a government and an economy that is taking that money and directly giving it to kill our Muslim brothers and sisters? And we should also speak out against the UAE government and the UAE for their role in what's happening in Sudan. As the largest backer of the RSF, Mohammed bin Zayed and the UAE have the blood of our Muslim brothers and sisters on their hands. Bin Zayed is no better than Netanyahu or Xi Jinping or Modi for their roles in the killing and torture of our brothers and sisters in Gaza, in Kashmir, and in East Turkestan. And we shouldn't be afraid to speak out against them and to expose them for their crimes. And if we're somehow afraid that if we speak out against the UAE, it's going to affect us maybe traveling to the Middle East, then we need to realign our priorities. We need to decide, like, the blood of our fellow Muslims is more important than going on vacation or visiting the Middle East. Even if it is going for Hajj or Umrah, it's a larger fard on us to support the Muslims who need it than it is even to go for Hajj. Because if we're going for Hajj, it's wajib on us if we're able to. If somebody prevents us and we're not able to go, not because of our lack of will or desire to go, but because something is preventing us, this fard is waived from us, is lifted from us. But the fard of speaking for and supporting for our brothers and sisters especially where we are, where we have a voice, we can speak. We are not in a country where we're restricted in our speech. We don't have an excuse. It is a fard ayn on us that we have to support them. We have to speak up for them. We have to do whatever we can to support them in whatever way we're able to. We cannot forget the word of Allah Azza wa Jal. وما لكم لا تقاتلون في سبيل الله والمستضعفين من الرجال والنساء والولدان الذين يقولون ربنا أخرجنا من هذه القرية الظالم أهلها واجعل لنا من لدنك وليا واجعل لنا من لدنك نصيرا. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us, what is the matter with you that you do not fight in the cause of Allah for the oppressed among the men and the women and the children who say, O our Lord, take us out of this city of oppressive people and appoint for us from yourself a protector and appoint for us from yourself a helper. This is what the people of Sudan are saying. You can watch the videos. They are saying, we are looking for somebody to help us, to take us out of this situation that we're in. And let's not forget the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he tells us that whoever of us sees an evil, let him change it with his hand, and if he's not able to do so, then with his tongue, and if he's not able to do so, then with his heart, and that is the weakest of faith. At least we can speak, at least we can use our tongues, and we need to use our tongues. And we also need to make sure that we never forget our brothers and sisters into that in our dua. They are desperately in need of it, and there shouldn't be a single day that goes by where we do not mention them at least once in our du'as. Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أَجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. And when my servant asks of you concerning me, indeed I am near. I respond to the invocation of the supplicant when he calls me. Allah Azza wa Jal is telling us, when you call upon Him, He is there. He is ready to answer us. So let us ask Allah Azza wa Jal concerning our brothers and sisters in Sudan, as we do for those in Gaza and everywhere else. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us He is waiting for us to call upon Him. And He never gets tired of us asking from Him, as long as we do it with sincerity and continuing our obedience to Him. And the final thing, and the most important thing, is that we need to turn back to the deen. If we want to have any hope of our dua being answered, we need to make sure we are actually practicing Islam. It's not a religion of empty words where we just, and empty rituals where we just say empty things and we just do some motions and we think this is enough. We need to make sure that we know who we are praying to. We know that this is Allah Azza wa Jal, the one who created us, the one who is the master of the entire universe. And we need to know what our obligations are, and we need to fulfill our obligations, especially the most basic of our obligations, and to fulfill them with iman, not just as an afterthought. And if we don't do this, then we can make dua day and night, but we have no chance of our dua being answered if we are just wasting our time with empty rituals. We need to leave behind our sins and to fulfill our obligations to Allah. And as the scholars have mentioned, our sins create a barrier between us and our du'as to Allah Azza wa Jal. And if we continue to sin and act like it's no big deal, then we shouldn't have any expectation that our du'as are going to be answered. We need to remember the story of Musa alayhi salam as well, and the drought that occurred with Bani Israel. The entire nation was punished with a drought because of one man's sins. We should have it in our minds, what if it is my sins that is causing this destruction in Sudan? Not because of something that happened there. What if it's because of me? We are one ummah. We are one nation. What if it is my sins that is causing the destruction that's happening? We need to have this in our minds that I need to turn back. I need to make tawbah and I need to leave my sins behind, because maybe if I do this, the punishment and this destruction is going to be lifted. Just as in the story of Musa alayhi salam and this drought, when the man, he turned back to Allah Azza wa Jal, immediately, before he even finished his tawbah, Allah Azza wa Jal caused the rain to fall. Just as it might be because of my sins that this is happening, it might be because of my tawbah that is lifted. What we can't do is we can't sit by and do nothing with no care or concern for our brothers and sisters in Sudan. There is an excuse that we hear a lot that is happening, it's so far away. Like, what can I even do? What do you expect me to do? That's on the other side of the world, and I'm here, and I have my own problems. And quite frankly, this is a flimsy excuse, and is just something that we tell ourselves so that we don't have to change anything that we're doing. We can continue to live in comfort, and we can continue to live however we want, and close our eyes and close our ears, because you know what? It's just so far away. What can I do? This is not the way of the true Muslim. I ask Allah Azza wa Jal to shower the Muslims of Sudan with mercy and patience and forgiveness, and I ask Allah Azza wa Jal to deliver them from what they are going through and to give them steadfastness. And I ask Allah Azza wa Jal to give us the bravery and the will and the ability to stand up for them and to speak on their behalf and to do whatever we can for them. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.